Hey everybody, welcome back to JD Does Dev. I'm JD, and in this video we're going to continue our Docksal training with part 4, getting started using Docksal. We're going to take some of the concepts we've been working with and put them all together and actually install and use our Docksal application. In this video, we're ready to get started with Docksal. So it is time to get hands-on, but before installing, we do have a couple of prerequisites and system requirements. The requirements are pretty slim for installing Docksal, but they are important. Now, in all systems, you need at least 8 GB of RAM or more. You also need command line access. This could be in a terminal, iTerm, an integrated IDE terminal, PuTTY. You just need to be able to work with the command line. Now, on macOS, you need a 2010 or newer model, and you need either Docker for Mac or VirtualBox installed. On Linux, by default, Apache listens on the address 0.0.0.0 port 80 and 0000 port 443. This will prevent Docksal's reverse proxy from running properly. You can resolve it in either of the following ways. Either reconfigure Apache to listen on different hosts, reconfigure Apache to listen on different ports, or just stop and disable Apache. You also need to check that you have installed and configured curl, which is a utility to call a URL with your command line, sudo, sudo, which allows you to run commands as super user or root user. You need a CPU with SSE 4.2 instructions that's supported, and you need Docker installed. Now, Windows needs Windows 10 with Windows subsystem for Linux and CPU with hardware virtualization. That could be VTX or AMD V, and those need to be supported and enabled in BIOS. You need Ubuntu 18.04 or greater installed as your Windows subsystem for Linux, and you need either Docker for Windows or VirtualBox installed. Once we have everything in place, now we're ready to begin installation. So, to install Docksal, you need administrator access for some of the tasks to run. On Linux and macOS, it adds commands to user local bin, which is a secured folder. It edits a few secured files and performs mounts, which may all require an elevated level of access. Now let's go over the steps that are required to install Docksal. So if you're starting off on a Mac using VirtualBox, which runs Docker inside a virtual machine using VirtualBox, first you need to make sure that you have VirtualBox installed. Now, if a notice appears to enable the kernel extension, allow it. This would be under System Preferences, Security, and Privacy. If there's no notice, then it's already enabled. Now, you can install Docksal by opening a terminal and running this command, bash curl-fssl https://get.docksal.io. Now, if you're installing on Mac with Docker for Mac, it's a little bit different. You have to make sure that Docker for Mac is installed and start and wait till the animation stops or the Docker menu says Docker is running. Now, install Docksal by opening a terminal and running essentially the same command, but we're adding in the Docker native =1 line. That sets the environment variable for this command to run, saying that yes, we are using Docker native. This is the preferred way to install for Mac now. Now, on Linux is essentially the same thing. Ubuntu, Mint, Debian, Fedora, CentOS, and derivatives of those are all supported. Check get.docker.com to see if you can install Docker on your distro if it's a little bit different. Now, on Windows, pretty much the same thing, but you need to make sure that all the prerequisites are met. And once you open up your Ubuntu shell, we're going to run this bash curl fssl https get.docksal.io command. This will run it through VirtualBox through your Ubuntu shell. Alright, now we're ready to start the system. So, assuming that installation went well, there's only one command we need to run. In your terminal, run fin system start. So let's take a look and see what happens when we first run fin system start. So I'm here in my Docksal training Docker app folder, which doesn't really matter which folder I'm in because we're just starting the system. So I'm going to run fin system start. Let's watch what happens. Okay, we can see that it's configuring the network, NFS shares, and all of this, these are pulling different images and putting them on our system so that we don't need to worry about installing them again and again. These will all be available to each of our applications every time that we need it. Now here, since it does have to do with some more secure parts of your system, it requires a password. As you can see here, this is for my SSH key, my pub key. So I'm just going to enter my password in here. And it adds it in. Great. So system's up, and it looks like everything's going well. Now we can examine our system with the command fin sysinfo, which is one of the most important commands and utilities we have at our disposal. It tells us almost everything we need to know about our system, including what might be going wrong with it. Now let's take a look at the output of fin sysinfo to see what information we have access to. All right, we're here in our terminal, so let's take a look at the output of fin sysinfo. I'm going to go through, run a couple things, and spit out a lot of information. So let's scroll up and take a look at what we've got here. So first we have our OS. That tells which OS I'm using. You can see it's a Mac, and some information about that. You can see that we're using the Docker desktop instead of Docker for virtual machine. Our version of Fin, Docker Compose version, the Docker client and server versions, with some information about those, including the version, the build date, all kinds of stuff. Docksal projects that are currently running. As you can see, there are none here. No virtual hosts are in use. Docksal networking has some information about the ports and IP addresses that we're going to be using to connect to Docksal. And this section here, as I mentioned in a previous video, Docksal's DNS requires an internet connection. So this is checking to see that the DNS will work. And then we have a list of running containers. These are containers that Docksal has spun up, including SSH agent, DNS, and vhost proxy. Those are all the ones that we spoke about before as system services. And then a few networks, which these are all spun up by Docksal. The version of Docker desktop that we have, as you can see, we've got the next version up from the expected version. It's usually fine, but be careful about updating without checking the docs. And then our hard drive usage. As you can see, got quite a bit available. Nothing really strange that we need to worry about here. So a lot of stuff came out from this one command, and it's extremely useful when debugging a project. If something isn't working quite right, or if there are questions about your configurations, if you ask on GitHub or in a Slack or anywhere that you can ask questions about Docksal, the first question that they're going to ask back is, can you give me the output of fin sysinfo? And this is how you get it. This is what you'll paste back. It's preferable that you only give the relevant information. For example, if you have a question about why isn't Docksal working with my version of Docker, you don't want to copy the entire output here. You can instead go up to this and get the client server information, or you can scroll down and find Docker desktop and get that version and maybe see, hey, it's expecting 2.1.0.5, but I've only got 1.9. etc. etc. That could be a problem, and you just solved it. All right, so far we've installed and started Docksal, we've checked our system, and explored how to inspect our system with a single command. Now, next we're going to spin up a project and explore how to work within our new environment. That's going to be it for this video. I'm JD, and this has been JD Does Dev. Go ahead and be sure to like and subscribe if you don't mind, and if there are any topics that you want me to cover or any comments or concerns, go ahead and leave them in the comments section down below. Thanks.